we did that sunrise service. It was the most, and definitely not because I preached. Not at all. You'll never hear me boast on the way I preach. Just to be out there for a sunrise service on the beach, watching the sun come up, and the way we had it set up was just awesome. The sun came up behind Taj as he was worshiping, and we were looking at it, and the pictures showed like the castmen. It was beautiful. We spend millions of dollars on buildings, and we can't feed the poor. We don't care about our orphans. We don't care about our widows. We shoot the wounded. Where is the church? We think we do fulfill our Christian responsibility because we show up for an hour and a half on Sunday mornings. Now, I know I may only be talking to a few of y'all tonight, so I'm not talking to y'all. I got the radical ones. You're here on a Tuesday. You probably got work tomorrow. You came in the middle of a monsoon. I think I saw y'all two pull up on a boat. I'm not talking about y'all. When I preach at places outside of what we would consider a local church, I do the best I can. I do everything in my power that God leads me to do to not be so hard on the church, simply because I don't want anybody who's involved to think that I am anti the church. Because I'm not anti the church. If you don't have a love for God's church, you need to get out of this thing called Christianity. Because that's what it's about. It's about building God's church. I never set myself up to be politically correct. But I do want to make sure that I don't give off the wrong impression and make people believe that I don't have a love for God's church. I have a love for God's church. But it's the humanistic, Americanized, preconceived idea that we call the church that drives me crazy. That felt good to say. The humanistic, Americanized, preconceived idea that we call the church. That's what I have a problem with. The church isn't this human institution that we meet at on Sunday mornings at 10:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. That's not the church. The word church in the Bible is ecclesia. Ecclesia does not denote a specific building or a specific location, but it does denote a specific group of people. And they're called saints. And the Bible says that they are to be holy as God is holy. The church is not the human institution that gathered together on Sunday mornings. The church is a group. The church is true, genuine, born-again believers. The church is true, genuine, born-again believers. They have them in every denomination. Even the ones you don't like. And get this. They have them in every race. The church is not some human institution that we meet at on Sunday mornings. We are called to meet, but that's not what God views the church. I'm not against God's church. I'm against the humanistic, Americanized, preconceived idea of what we call the church. There is a model for God's church. It's not an hour and a half on Sunday, but a 37-minute sermon, hot coffee, and fresh donuts. That's not the model for God's church. The model for God's church is saving the lost, healing the sick, raising the dead, casting out demons, and setting captives free. In the book of Revelation, Jesus uses the phrase, "He who has an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit is saying to the church." He uses that phrase 7 times in chapters 2 and chapter 3. Chapter 2 and chapter 3 is where he gives the letters to the 7 churches. Now, of the 7 churches, he rebukes 5 of the 7 churches. Jesus rebukes 5 of the 7 churches during this time when they were much closer to the original design of God's plan for the church. He rebukes 5 of the 7 churches, yet we think we have it figured out today. We have the book of Acts, but God has a model for his church. He has given us the book of Acts. The book of Acts is and always will be God's original design for the church. And if we look, listen, in the book of Revelation, in those two chapters, chapter 2 and chapter 3, not only did Jesus rebuke 5 of the 7 churches, but he also commended them on the things that they're doing right. So if Jesus is rebuking a church for doing something wrong, it's a good idea that we should pay attention to that and make sure we're not doing it in today's church. If he's commending them on things that they're doing, then it's a good indicator that we need to pay attention to that and make sure that those are the things that we're doing in today's church. So when you take the book of Acts, which was God's original and still is his design for today's American church, and you marry it over to the book of Revelation, you have a pretty picture of what God's plan for today's church is.